Welcome to Wander Mode, a podcast that wanders through topics such as entrepreneurship, traveling, and mamahood. As a teacher turned entrepreneur and a mama to one, I am sharing my tips and tricks to maintain harmony in a multifaceted life. Let's wander. Back in August, I was interviewed by the first person in my entrepreneurial journey to say yes. Kallai Plummer with Kallai Co. wanted to hear my story, and she is a fractional COO. She partners with businesses in order to assist them with the execution and management of their day-to-day processes. And I was only 2 months out of teaching, 2 months into my podcast journey, 2 months into starting this new side of our rental business. And I actually stumbled across Kallai through social media, and she was open to having guests. So I submitted an application, and when she responded that she wanted to have me on the podcast, I was honestly really shocked. I was excited, but I was shocked because here is this gal who is interviewing all of these fantastic women and sharing phenomenal stories, and she's wanting to hear my story. While chatting with Kallai, I was so nervous. She was so calm, and she had this great energy. She was very easy to talk to. But the episode with my interview posted recently on her podcast, and as I'm sitting listening to it, there are a few things that dawned on me. First, since starting a podcast in June, I have actually been struck by the number of quote-unquote yes women I have encountered on this journey. The number of women that have said yes to being on my podcast while I'm very much in a growth phase is simply life-changing for me. Samantha, a woman with the determination to shift from entrepreneur to mental health counselor. Courtney, a business coach for women wanting to create online courses. Katie, a tarot card reader that used COVID to launch a new passion. Kate, a former teacher turned home design entrepreneur. Kobe Co., a mother-daughter candle company duo that is promoting community connectedness and giving back. None of these women had to say yes to being on a growing podcast, but they did. And again, it was life-changing for me. I see all of these inspirational posts on social media about learning to say no to things. And I recognize that we can't always be saying yes. No one has time for that in their day. But I think about the other side of that equation. What would happen if we said yes? Would it open up a possibility? Would it change your life? I think specifically about my interview with Courtney. Prior to that interview, I thought Courtney was simply someone that seemed like an interesting person on social media. She was a mom of one. I was a mom of one. She loved outdoor adventures. I loved outdoor adventures. She kept it real, and I pride myself on keeping it real. So I asked to interview her, and she said yes. And it was really through that interview that I discovered what it was that she did. She helps women build online courses in order to bring supplemental income to their families. Holy buckets. I was building an online course, and at the time I was floundering. But because she said yes, I interviewed her. Because she said yes, I signed up to go to her masterclass. Because she said yes, I hired her as my business coach. Because she said yes, I am now hiring her to help me with my strength goals in 2024. Yes, me hiring her as a coach has impacted her life for the positive financially, right? It's her business. But you know what? That yes gave me more confidence in my podcasting and interviewing ability. It gave me the opportunity to find a clear direction for our business that I didn't have before. It connected me with someone who also cared about strength from the perspective of wanting to be able to keep up with her kid. Saying yes, friends, has profound impacts. Again, not saying for you to say yes to everything, but If you lean as a little more of a no person, I'm just simply asking you to consider what saying yes might do in your life. The second thing that I realized from listening to my podcast with Kallai is that when we think sometimes in life that there is no progress happening, it's rather that we can't see it when it is slowly occurring. I was so nervous on that podcast with Kallai. We're sitting here chatting about the vacation rental business that Ben and I have. And maybe if you're out there listening and you didn't know me, you probably wouldn't pick up on it. But I was not exuding confidence in what I was sharing that Ben and I were doing. And why is that? Well, it's because I didn't have a clear sense of direction at the time of what we were doing. I didn't have a marketing plan. I didn't have a course hosting platform. I didn't have any of the tools to record a course. And I was lost and I knew it. And here I am attempting to scrounge up some courage to chat with Kallai about our plans for the business. It was about a month later when I recognized that I wasn't going anywhere fast. I had learned a ton from making the podcast, and I was enjoying the day-to-day aspect of setting a new schedule, learning through these podcasts that I was creating and listening to, and I was journaling a ton. And I talked about this a little bit in last week's episode, but around September, it became obvious to me that I had been out of teaching for 4 months, and that if I truly wanted to stand up this business venture with a vacation rental online course, I needed to get serious. And like I said earlier, that is when Courtney entered my life and I began taking her course in order to get my crap together. And getting my crap together, I did. But what is interesting is that although I was making so much forward progress in terms of the business, over the course of this last month, I felt really discouraged. Why? Well, I haven't been getting through my task lists. I'm not as far in creating the course as I had hoped to be. Ben and I both got a really bad virus, which put us weeks behind in recording. It was honestly like the virus that would never end. And if you listen to some of my previous episodes, you could definitely hear that I was under the weather. So not exactly our fault per se, but it still impacted progress. I am slowly learning and improving on social media, but it's still a slog for me to want to do it. And organically growing a business takes time. But being the perfectionist that I am and former teacher, not seeing results is hard for me. Here I am reflecting back to chatting with Kallai on that podcast, and holy smokers, has there been a lot of growth? When someone asks me what I'm doing now compared to when I was on her podcast, I'm not fumbling around for a response anymore. I very clearly state, I am an entrepreneur in the short-term rental industry. I am a podcaster. I am a business coach. That is progress. When I think about not having anything on the radar in August for the rentals course and now having 3 modules or 31 lessons recorded, that is progress. Going from social media posts that were messy, full of errors, they lacked cohesion, to a basic layout and a plan for content, that is progress. And I'm recognizing that when we are too close to something, it is really hard to see it for what it truly is. I saw this quote by Jeff Olson that said, "Some quit due to slow progress, never grasping the fact that slow progress is progress." I need to stop viewing slow progress as equaling 0 results. There is a reason that the tortoise and the hare story is so widely shared. I need to channel my inner turtle, and I am putting this out here into the podcast verse in order for you to hold me accountable to channeling that inner turtle. Life is not a race. And this hustle that is in my head is leaving me spinning in circles and literally going nowhere rather than sticking my neck out and moving forward. The final reflection from listening to her podcast comes in the form of storytelling. I hadn't interviewed anyone at that point in time on my podcast when I was personally interviewed. But here I am telling my story to Kallai's listeners. And I think that there is something so valuable in telling stories and hearing stories. In terms of telling stories, I believe that there is a lot of growth that happens because there's so much processing that occurs when we are sharing aspects of ourselves out loud with others. We are saying things perhaps that we're hearing ourselves say for the very first time, and that sits with you long after you have shared something. Sharing your story through a podcast provides this strange sense of connection with others because your story connects you to others that you haven't even met and likely will never meet. It is this sense that you're simply a small part of the shared human experience. Hearing stories from others is also something that I find incredibly valuable. Recently, I discovered the Julia Dreyfus podcast, Wiser Than Me. I'm only 2 episodes in, but there is something about hearing older women share about life, motherhood, aging, womanhood that is comforting. Comforting probably because others have walked the same paths that we are currently living in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, and beyond. Do our stories unfold differently? Of course. But the base of all of these experiences usually carries with them the same lessons, the same emotions, the same reactions, decisions. And it really has been so uplifting for me to listen to this podcast in the mornings because it gets me out of my business head for a little bit and just lets me be a girl, you know? I will be sure to share Kallai's episode on social media and on the podcast blog so that you have access to that. And really, after you're now hearing my reflections, if you go and listen to it at this point in time, you're probably going to be able to pick up on some of my takeaways that I'm discussing today. So to all those women who said yes, a big thanks. To all those vulnerably sharing your story, I see you. And to all of those listening and learning from the stories of others, thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. If you wandered to this point in the episode, thank you for listening to the Wander Mode podcast. Please leave a review and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at wandermodeco. Reach me by email at julie@wandermode.co. Until next time, wander on.